Hey folks, my name is Shay Parker and this is RTFM, where today I'm teaching you an expansion to a game. Because when you have a big game, why not make it bigger? Now, if you haven't played Terraforming Mars, you might want to watch my video teaching the base game first. Once you've done that, or if you've already played, you'll be ready to learn about this game's 5 expansions: Hellas and Elysium, Prelude, Venus Next, Colonies, and the newest expansion, Turmoil. I'll be teaching them in that order, which also happens to go from least to most complicated, which works out well for me. And if you're worried that 5 expansions sounds like too many, well, maybe all of them together are, but each box is pretty small, so they actually fit into the game really well. With that in mind, let's get started. I'm putting these two together because they're both very easy to learn, and because Hellas and Elysium doesn't really have a box that I can put behind me. That's because they're basically just maps. It's a double-sided board with 2 new regions of Mars to colonize. The designated ocean spaces are different, there's some new placement bonuses, there's some new awards and milestones, and Hellas has the South Pole, which is a new placement rule. You have to pay 6 mega credits to put a tile here, but if you do, by melting one of the polar ice caps, you immediately get to place an ocean tile. Besides that, neither map has any space for Noctis City, so that can be placed anywhere, and the same goes for Hellas and lava flows. Now, I could tell you each of the new milestones and awards, but that would involve me literally just reading a list of 20 different items, and I can think of very few things more boring than that. Plus, they're all listed on the sleeve that comes with these maps, so I'm just going to move on to Prelude. This is the smallest box of the bunch, but I think it brings the most important addition to the game. The first couple of rounds of Terraforming Mars are all about getting your engine going, and that's fine, but it takes a little while to get to the meat of the game, you know? Prelude kicks things into gear by changing your setup a little bit. Now, along with the 2 corporations and 10 project cards, you'll also draw 4 Prelude cards and keep 2 of them. These jumpstart your economy in a number of ways, and are going to help you make a plan for the rest of the game. Definitely not something to add for your first time, because the initial setup is already a bit daunting, but once you're comfortable with that, this adds a very satisfying layer of strategy. On top of that, there are also some new project and corporation cards. They introduce wild tags, which can be whatever you want them to be during your turn, but don't trigger any effects when played and don't count towards endgame scoring. And when playing solo, you now only have 12 generations to win. And there's a new solo variant where instead of trying to fulfill all of the global parameters, you're trying to get to a Terraform rating of 63 before the game ends. To help this along, there's a new standard project which costs 16 megabucks and just raises your TR by 1. So that's Prelude and the Hellas and Elysium maps. Next up, let's go to Venus. Sure, Mars is cool, but have you considered Venus? It's closer to Earth and has a very similar gravity. I mean, yeah, sure, the atmosphere is toxic, dense, and way too hot, but we can figure that out, right? In the Venus Next expansion, as well as a bunch of new cards and corporations, you'll add on the Venus board. This has a few spaces for some cool floating cities, but the big addition is the Venus scale, which is a simplified measurement of Venus's terraforming progress. This is a new global parameter, so every time you advance it, you'll gain a TR. You'll also get to draw a card at 8% and gain an extra TR at 16. And there's a new standard project called air scrapping, which costs 15 money dollars and lets you increase the Venus scale 1 step. However, because Mars is still the main focus of the world government, maxing this out is not required to end the game. On the new project cards, you'll see 2 new things. One is the Venus tag, which denotes Venus, and the other is the new resource floaters. These represent floating infrastructure high up in the atmosphere, but they work just like animals and microbes. And there's a new milestone and award: Hoverlord, which you can claim if you have at least 7 floaters on your cards, and Venophile, which rewards the player with the most Venus tags in play. These increase your options when taking a milestone or award, but not how many can be claimed in a game. That's still 3. And lastly, for the main game, there's a new phase after production called the solar phase. There are 2 steps to the solar phase. First, check to see if the endgame has triggered. If it hasn't, then move on to step 2, which is world government terraforming. See, the governments know that adding Venus to your plate when you're already busy with Mars is a lot to handle, so they've decided to chip in. The first player will take on the role of the WG and choose one of the non-maxed out global parameters to increase, including Venus. If they choose oceans, they get to choose where to place a water tile. If they choose oxygen, they don't place a greenery, they just increase the oxygen. And if placing an ocean or raising a parameter would trigger a bonus of any kind, that bonus goes to the government, so no one would get this heat. However, other cards like Arctic Algae here may still be triggered, and if it triggers more terraforming progress, that also happens. One more quick thing, if you're playing a solo game with Venus Next, your goal is now to max out all 4 global parameters. The other rules stay the same, so it's a bit harder, but remember, you do still have the help of the world government, so it's not all bad. Alright, we're getting pretty good at this terraforming thing. Let's think bigger and set up some outer world colonies, yeah? Sure, Mars and Venus are cool, but have you considered Europa? It's got a lot of water. How about Ceres, the biggest object in the asteroid belt? And we can't forget the moon because it's the moon. Look, there's a lot of great stuff in this solar system, so all we have to do is set up some colonies and get going. As well as some new corporations and projects, Colonies adds colonies, obviously. These provide an extra way to earn resources, but you'll need to be patient if you want a big payout. At the beginning of the game, randomly choose colonies equal to the number of players plus 2. So if you have 3 players, put out 5 colonies. Or if you're playing a 2-player game, you'll also put out 5. Put the trade fleets tile nearby and place 1 fleet for each player on the board with a cube matching your color in the fleet. This is adorable. You'll also place a white cube on the highlighted second space of the colonies representing their current value. That is, except for Titan, Enceladus, and Miranda. These colonies provide floaters, microbes, and animals, so you can't interact with them and they won't start producing until someone plays a card that can collect those resources. When someone does, then move their cube to the second space. Now that those are set up, you'll have access to 2 new actions. Building a colony is a new standard project, costs 17 megabucks and lets you place a player marker on the lowest space of a colony. Immediately earn the bonus listed on that space, so for Luna here, we'd increase our money production by 2. Also, if the white marker is covering up the lowest space, that's fine, just push it 1 space forward. Each player can only have 1 colony per celestial body, and as you can see, there are only 3 bonus spots on each colony. That's because no matter how many players you have, each moon or dwarf planet can only support 3 colonies. Okay, so you built a cool moon base and you gotten some money, but the real cash is in trade. Trading is not a standard project, it's just a new action, but it allows you to reap the benefits of the colony, and it works like this. As an action, you can pay the cost, which is 9 mega credits, or 3 energy, or 3 titanium, to send your trade fleet to the colony. No one else can trade with them, and you won't be able to move your fleet again until the end of the round. Then, gain a reward based on the location of the white cube, and everyone with the colony gets a bonus as well. If we traded with Luna here, we'd gain 10 mega credits plus 2 because we have a colony, and Red would also gain 2 money. Then, slide the white cube as far left as it'll go before hitting a player marker. Or if there are no colonies yet, stop it at the second space. That white cube is going to be moving up the track every turn because of the new step in the solar phase. After the world government terraforming, you'll perform colony production, which simply moves each white cube on every colony tile 1 space to the right and returns all trade fleets to the big trade tile. And lastly, if you're playing a solo game with colonies, reduce your starting mega credit production 2 steps, and when choosing your starting cards and corporations, draw 4 colony tiles, but only keep 3. And that's the Colonies expansion. Man, things have been going pretty well. It sure would be a shame if someone added some turmoil. Sure, Mars, Venus, and all the moons you could ask for are great, but have you considered government? Okay, so Turmoil is a little different from the other expansions. It comes with a few extra corps and cards like the others, but the big changes come from these 2 boards. The first one is the Global Event Board, which holds event cards similar to what you might find in a ton of other games, but you get to see what's coming a couple turns in advance. The second is the Terraforming Committee, which has 6 different parties that you and the other players will be vying for control of as the game goes on, so let's set it all up. Oh, and I should mention that the copy I have is a prototype, so some components will be a little different from the production copies that are due later this year. Okay, so start by placing these 2 boards nearby, add 1 of the gray delegate markers to the chairman's seat and the rest to the neutral reserve, add 6 markers matching each player's color in the delegate reserve, and 1 for each player in the lobby. Draw the first 2 cards of the global event deck and place them on the coming and distant global event spaces, then look at the party affiliations on the top left of each card and place a gray delegate in the matching party spaces. When placing a delegate in a party, there are 2 things to check for. First, if that party has more delegates than any other, it becomes the dominant party. Place the dominance marker to show this. Secondly, if one color has more delegates than any other, place 1 of their delegates in the party leader space. Lastly, the Greens always start as the ruling party, so place the green policy tile at the top of the board. These policies will change the game in some way. Like when the Greens are the ruling party, for example, whenever you place a greenery tile, you'll gain 4 mega credits. Next, let's look at the event cards. These will trigger during the solar phase and then advance forward. Since we don't have an event on the first round, all you'll do is advance the cards and draw a new one. This also triggers which parties gain neutral delegates. On the new current event, match the party in the middle right of the card. Then for the new distant event, match the top left. And if either of these affect the dominant party or party leader, make sure to change it accordingly. The events themselves might help or hurt you, and they'll often be modified by your influence. Influence is determined on the committee board by 3 things. If one of your delegates is the chairman, that's one influence. If your delegate is the leader of the dominant party, that's one influence. And if you have any non-leader delegates in the dominant party, that's one influence. So here we would have 3. When this event card triggers, everyone will gain 1 steel per steel production, max 5, and influence. If we have 6 steel production and 3 influence, we gain 8 because we stopped counting our steel production at 5. As you can see, this adds a new area control minigame that you'll need to be aware of. The way that you control these areas is through the new action lobbying. When you take this action, place one of your delegates from either the lobby or the reserve into any party, adjusting it as necessary. Placing the lobby delegate is free, but the reserve delegates cost 5 each to place. You can take this action as many times as you want, but each action only lets you move 1 delegate. Let's wrap this up by looking at the new Turmoil step of the solar phase. After world government terraforming and colony production, if you're playing with those expansions, the Turmoil step begins. Because everything is so turmoil-y, start by having each player lose 1 TR. Because of this, if you're playing with a standard Tharsis region map, you'll cover up the Terraformer milestone with this replacement tile that I don't have because, again, prototype. The new milestone only needs you to get to 26 instead of 35. Anyway, after you lose TR and cry a little bit, you'll trigger the global event like we talked about earlier. Next, you'll install the new government. Whichever party was dominant now becomes ruling, and everyone gains the ruling bonus shown on the board. For example, if the Mars First party becomes ruling, everyone will gain 1 megabuck for each building tag they have. Then the dominant party leader becomes the new chairman, kicking the old chairman back to the reserve along with all delegates from the old dominant party, because power is fleeting. Whichever player becomes the new chairman gets 1 TR for their efforts, so have fun with that. The dominance marker moves to whichever party now has the most delegates, or if there's a tie, whichever party is closer in clockwise order from the last dominant party, and then make sure there's 1 delegate from each player in the lobby by taking from the reserve. After you've done this, advance the event cards like we saw before, placing neutral delegates in the corresponding 2 parties. And that's how you play Turmoil and all of the other expansions. For now. This team seems really good at adding on to this game, so who knows when that's going to change. In any case, I hope you liked the video. If you're a Patreon backer watching this video early, thank you so much for supporting the channel. And if not, dude, my rules lawyer saw this a month ago, so you might want to consider donating if you want to see videos like this and the strategy video I posted right when they go up. Either way, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.